The shuttle touched down on Thalassa 7 with a gentle thud that made several cadets grip their seats. Owen Blake pressed his face against the window and watched the moon's purple landscape stretch out before them. Somewhere down there lived creatures from 100 dying worlds, all gathered in one last sanctuary. "Listen up, people." Instructor Wells stood at the front of the shuttle, her gray hair tied back in a practical bun. "This preserve houses endangered species from across the galaxy. You will maintain safe distances at all times. You will not feed the animals. You will not attempt physical contact. Am I clear?" 30 voices answered in unison. Owen mouthed the words along with everyone else, but his attention had already drifted back to the window. This field trip was supposed to be the highlight of their second year at Earth's Interstellar Academy. Most of his classmates had been talking about it for weeks. The station itself looked like someone had dropped a silver mushroom onto the moon's surface. Its dome reflected the gas giant Thalassa 7 orbited, creating strange purple and blue patterns across the metal. Owen grabbed his pack and followed the other cadets down the ramp. Director Veles met them at the entrance. The Arcturian stood nearly 7 feet tall, his skin a deep blue that reminded Owen of Earth's oceans. "Welcome to Preservation Station Thalassa. You are about to witness some of the rarest life forms in known space. Please remember that many of these creatures have experienced tremendous loss. Treat them with respect." The group moved through sterile white corridors that opened suddenly into a massive biodome. Owen's breath caught. Environments from dozens of worlds had been recreated here. A crystalline forest grew in one section, its trees chiming softly in the artificial breeze. Further away, a methane swamp bubbled and hissed. Creatures he had only seen in textbooks wandered freely within their designated zones. "Over here," said Wells, leading them toward the eastern section. "This is our most challenging resident." Owen saw the barriers first. Not the standard energy fields used elsewhere in the preserve, but heavy reinforced barriers that hummed with power. Warning signs covered every surface. Beyond them stretched a rocky terrain dotted with caves. Then he saw Virix. The dragon lay coiled near the largest cave entrance, so massive that Owen initially mistook him for part of the landscape. Scales the color of midnight covered his body, each one as large as Owen's hand. 4 legs ended in claws that could probably tear through steel. Multiple eyes ran along both sides of his elongated head, all of them closed. His tail alone had to be 20 feet long. "This is a Draenith," Wells explained, her voice softer now. "The last of his species. His homeworld was destroyed by a supernova 15 years ago. He was off-planet at the time. Virix has been here ever since." "Why the heavy barriers?" asked Ro, Owen's roommate. The Centauri's natural curiosity always got the better of him. Director Veles stepped forward. "There was an incident 10 years ago. A researcher ignored protocols. Virix defended himself. No one was killed, but the injuries were severe. Since then, we maintain maximum security measures." The other cadets pressed closer to the barriers, taking photos and recordings. Owen hung back and watched Virix instead of photographing him. The dragon hadn't moved since they arrived, hadn't even opened his eyes, but something about the way he held himself made Owen's chest ache. He knew that posture. He had seen it in the mirror often enough after his parents died. That was the shape grief took when it had nowhere to go. "The Draenith were social creatures," Wells continued. "They lived in family groups of 20 to 30 individuals. They communicated through bioluminescent patterns on their scales and sang to each other across vast distances. Virix hasn't displayed his patterns or sung since arriving here." "Can he understand us?" someone asked. "He has a translator chip implanted," said Veles. "He understands perfectly well. He simply chooses not to engage." The group moved on to see other creatures, but Owen lingered. He studied Virix's closed eyes and the dull gray tone of his scales. The textbook said Draenith scales could glow in dozens of colors. This one looked like someone had drained all the color from the universe and left only shadow. Later, during the lunch break, most cadets gathered in the central viewing area. Owen grabbed his packed meal and walked back toward the eastern section. He found a spot on the barrier wall near Vrix's habitat and sat down. Vrix still hadn't moved. Owen unwrapped his sandwich and ate slowly, watching the dragon breathe. Each breath took nearly 10 seconds, slow and measured like someone counting time until nothing mattered anymore. "Must be lonely," Owen said quietly, not really expecting anyone to hear. "Being the last one." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then one of Vrix's eyes opened. Just one. It focused on Owen with an intensity that should have been frightening. Owen didn't look away. He broke his sandwich in half and stood up, walking to the very edge of the barrier. His heart hammered, but he kept his movements slow and calm. He placed half the sandwich on the ground just inside the barrier's edge, then stepped back to his spot on the wall. Vrix's eye followed every movement. Minutes passed. Owen finished his half of the sandwich and pulled out an apple. He had just taken a bite when Vrix moved. The dragon uncoiled with surprising grace for something so large. His claws made no sound on the rocky ground as he approached the barrier. He lowered his massive head and sniffed the sandwich. Then, with movements so careful they seemed almost painful, he picked it up between two claws and ate it. Their eyes met across the barrier. Owen swallowed his bite of apple and managed a small smile. "Better than eating alone, right?" Vrix's eye closed, but before he turned away, Owen could have sworn he saw a flicker of something in that ancient gaze. Not hostility, not anger, just a question that had been unasked for 15 years. "Why?" Owen returned the next day with extra food in his pack. His roommate Ro had given him a long look that morning when Owen asked the kitchen staff for double portions. "You know feeding the animals is against regulations," the Centauri had said, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "I'm not feeding animals," Owen replied. "I'm sharing lunch with someone who needs company." Now he sat on the same barrier wall, unwrapping a sandwich that his foster sister had taught him to make. Peanut butter and honey on wheat bread. Simple, but it had gotten him through plenty of hard days back on Earth. Vrix lay in the same position as yesterday, coiled near his cave. But this time both eyes were open, watching Owen from the moment he arrived. Owen held up the sandwich. "I wasn't sure what you'd like, so I brought a few options. This one's sweet. I've also got cheese and tomato if you prefer savory." Vrix didn't respond, but his eyes tracked every movement as Owen set half the sandwich near the barrier. Owen bit into his own half and chewed slowly. The preserve's artificial sun warmed his shoulders. Somewhere in the distance, something chirped a melody that sounded almost like birdsong. "I grew up in Seattle," Owen said between bites. "Rained probably 200 days a year. My parents used to joke that they'd forgotten what the sun looked like." He paused, swallowed. "They died when I was 7, transport accident. My sister and I went to live with our aunt and uncle. They were good people, still are." Vrix moved then. The dragon uncurled and approached the barrier with that same careful grace. He took the sandwich half and ate it, those multiple eyes never leaving Owen's face. "The thing about losing people," Owen continued, "is that everyone tells you it gets easier. They're lying. It doesn't get easier. You just get better at carrying it." He pulled out an apple and took a bite. "But carrying it alone makes it heavier. I figured that out eventually." For the first time, Vrix spoke. His voice came through the translator chip as a deep rumble that Owen felt in his chest. "Why do you speak to me, human?" Owen considered the question. "Because you look like you haven't had a conversation in a long time, and because eating lunch alone is terrible." "I am dangerous," Vrix said. The words came out flat, like he was reciting a fact rather than making a threat. "Are you?" Owen finished his apple and started on the cheese sandwich. "You've been pretty gentle with the food so far. Those claws could probably cut through just about anything, but you picked up that sandwich like it was made of glass." Vrix's scales rippled, a movement that traveled along his entire body. "I hurt someone 10 years ago. The barriers are justified." "What happened?" Owen kept his voice calm, conversational. Silence stretched between them. Owen didn't push. He knew from his own therapy sessions that some stories needed time to surface. Finally, Vrix lowered his massive head until it nearly touched the ground. The researcher wanted genetic samples. He came repeatedly. Each extraction was painful. I asked him to stop. He did not stop. When he came the 15th time, I defended myself. Owen absorbed this information. Did anyone ask you for consent before he started taking samples? No. Then you defended yourself against someone who was hurting you without permission. Owen set down his sandwich. That's not the same as being dangerous. Vrix's eyes widened slightly. The director said I was volatile. Unpredictable, a threat to station personnel. The director, Owen said carefully, probably had to write a lot of reports after that incident. Sometimes people protect their jobs instead of seeking truth. He pulled out a cookie. My uncle's a lawyer. He taught me that there's what happened, and then there's how people describe what happened. Those are often very different things. You do not fear me. It wasn't a question this time, more like Vrix was trying to understand an impossible equation. I'm 19 years old and barely passing astrogation, Owen admitted. I'm probably going to end up on some boring cargo route when I graduate, hauling supplies between stations and trying not to fall asleep at the controls. I'm ordinary in every measurable way. He broke the cookie in half and placed one part near the barrier. But I'm pretty good at recognizing pain. And you're in pain. That doesn't make me afraid. It makes me sad. Vrix took the cookie half with those careful claws. He ate it slowly, and Owen noticed for the first time that small patterns were appearing on his scales. Not bright, just faint traces of color where there had been only gray. Blues and purples that flickered like distant stars. My name was once sung across 3 solar systems, Vrix said quietly. My family's harmonies could be heard from orbit. We sang of history, of love, of simple joys like warmth and flight. Now there is no one to sing with, no one to hear. Owen felt the weight of those words settle over him. What was your favorite song? Vrix's eyes closed. We had a lullaby for hatchlings. It spoke of safe nests and protective wings, of never being alone even in the darkest night. I'd like to hear it sometime, Owen said, if you'd be willing to share. I have not sung in 15 years, human. Owen, my name is Owen. Owen, Vrix tested the name. Why does one human cadet with ordinary grades and a cargo route future believe he can reach across barriers that have stood for a decade? Owen smiled. Because someone has to, and I happen to be the one sitting here with extra sandwiches. He stood and brushed crumbs from his uniform. I should get back before Instructor Wells notices I'm gone. I'll be here tomorrow, though, same time. Vrix's scales flickered with those faint colors again, slightly brighter now. I will be here. I am always here. Yeah, Owen said softly, but tomorrow you won't be. Alone. He walked away, feeling multiple eyes watching his back. Behind him, so quiet he almost missed it, came a sound like distant wind chimes, not quite a song, but maybe the memory of one. By the 4th day, other cadets had started noticing Owen's routine. Some whispered behind his back. A few laughed outright. One cadet from the advanced combat track made monster noises whenever Owen passed. Owen ignored them all and kept returning to the barrier wall. Tell me about your world, Vrix said during lunch. The dragon now waited for Owen's arrival, positioned near the barrier with those luminescent patterns dancing across his scales in shades of blue and silver. Owen described Earth as best he could. The oceans that covered most of the planet, mountains that pierced clouds, cities that never slept, and forests where you could walk for days without seeing another person. He talked about rain and snow and the way autumn painted leaves in colors that lasted only weeks before winter erased them. Vrix listened to every word. Sometimes his scales would flicker brighter, especially when Owen described water. My world had crystalline formations that sang when wind passed through them, Vrix said. The sound carried for hundreds of miles. We would navigate by the songs of different crystal fields. That sounds beautiful. It was. Vrix's voice grew quieter. I was in the outer system, studying gravitational patterns near our sun when the star went unstable. I saw the explosion from my research station. I saw my world burn. I calculated the time it would take for the shockwave to reach me and realized I could not possibly make it home before everything ended. Owen set down his sandwich, appetite forgotten. I received their final messages, Vrix continued. My mother sang. My father and siblings sang. Every Draenith on the planet sang together as the fires came. They sang the ancient song of reunion, the one we reserved for death, for the belief that all songs eventually harmonize in the great silence. His scales went dim. I was not there to add my voice. I survived because I was elsewhere, studying stars instead of being with my family when they needed me. Vrix, Owen said carefully, you couldn't have saved them. I should have died with them. No, Owen stood and walked to the barrier's edge. They sang reunion, right? That means they believed they'd be together again, including you. Eventually, they didn't sing a song that meant you had to die with them. They sang one that meant they'd wait. Vrix's eyes fixed on Owen with an intensity that made the air feel heavy. How can a human barely old enough to vote understand these things? Because my parents died while I was at school, Owen said. I spent years thinking I should have been in that transport with them. That surviving made me guilty of something. He pressed his palm against the barrier, feeling its energy hum against his skin. But my aunt told me something. She said that the people who love us don't want us to stop living just because they're gone. They want us to carry their love forward, not bury it with them. Your wisdom comes from your aunt, then. My wisdom comes from being sad for a really long time and finally letting people help me. Owen smiled slightly. Also therapy, lots of therapy. For the first time since Owen had met him, Vrix made a sound that might have been laughter. It rumbled deep in his chest and made the ground vibrate. Humans require therapy to process grief. Humans require therapy to process basically everything. We're kind of a mess, honestly. Vrix's scales brightened, swirling with patterns Owen hadn't seen before. Purples mixed with blues, creating spirals that moved across his body like water flowing over stones. I have not laughed in 15 years. How does it feel? Strange, painful, like using muscles that have forgotten their purpose. Vrix shifted his weight, his massive body moving with surprising grace. Owen Blake with ordinary grades and a cargo route future, you are either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, Owen admitted. He pulled out an orange and started peeling it. Hey, I've been meaning to ask, the lullaby you mentioned, the one about safe nests and never being alone, would you teach it to me? Vrix went very still. You cannot sing it, your vocal structure is different. I know, but I could learn the words, the meaning. Then at least 2 people would know it instead of 1. The patterns on Vrix's scales began to pulse slowly, like a heartbeat made visible. Why would you want to learn a dead language from an extinct species? Because it shouldn't be extinct, not completely, not if someone still remembers it. Owen finished peeling the orange and offered half through the barrier. Songs matter. They're how we remember who we were and who we loved. If you teach me, then even when you're gone someday, someone will still know your family sang to their children about safety and love. Vrix took the orange with trembling claws. You think very far ahead for one so young. I think about what lasts, Owen corrected. What's worth keeping when everything else falls apart? Vrix ate the orange slowly. Then he lifted his head and began to hum. The sound started deep, almost below Owen's hearing range, then climbed into harmonies that seemed impossible from a single throat. The translator didn't process it. This was pure Draenith, untranslated and raw. The song lasted maybe 2 minutes. When it ended, Owen found his eyes wet. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. That is only the melody, Vrix said. The words are complex, the meaning deeper than your language can convey, but the core is this: you are held, you are known, you are never, never alone. Owen wiped his eyes. Will you teach me, even if I can't sing it properly? Vrix's scales glowed brighter than Owen had ever seen them, rippling with colors that reminded him of the northern lights back home. Yes, Owen Blake, I will teach you, but you must promise me something. What? When they make you leave this place, when your field trip ends, you must promise to remember that songs exist even when no one sings them. That love persists even when everyone who shared it is gone. That loneliness ends when someone decides it should. Owen pressed his palm to the barrier again. I promise, but I'm not done visiting yet. We still have 3 more days. 3 days, Virix repeated. Then what? Then I figure out how to come back, Owen said simply. Virix's scales pulsed with colors that looked like hope. Director Veles found Owen on the 5th day. Cadet Blake, the Arcturian's voice carried the kind of authority that made people stand straighter. A word, please. Owen had been showing Virix pictures of Earth's oceans on his datapad. The dragon had leaned close to the barrier, fascinated by images of creatures living in water deeper than his species had ever explored. Now those multiple eyes watched as Owen stood and walked away from the wall. Sir, you have been spending considerable time with our most dangerous resident, Veles said. His blue skin darkened slightly, a sign of concern in his species. I need you to understand something. Virix is not a pet, he is not. Your friend, he is a traumatized survivor with a documented history of violence. He defended himself against abuse, Owen replied. That's different from violence. Veles's eyes narrowed. You read the incident reports. I requested them from the station database, public records. Owen met the director's gaze. The researcher Dalvin Cross had been taking genetic samples without proper consent protocols, 15 separate extractions over 3 months. The reports show that Virix filed complaints 7 times before the incident. No one responded. That researcher is no longer with us, Veles said stiffly, and his methods were reviewed and found lacking. But that does not change the fact that Virix broke 3 of Cross's ribs and caused internal bleeding. After being tortured for 3 months. Cadet Blake, Veles's voice hardened. I understand you have formed an emotional attachment to Virix, but you need to face reality. He has requested a transfer to an uninhabited moon where he will live in complete isolation. This transfer has been approved. In 20 days, Virix will leave this station forever. The words hit Owen like cold water. What? He cannot remain here. The Council has determined that continued interaction with other species causes him distress. Isolation is, unfortunately, the kindest option available. Kindest? Owen felt anger building in his chest. You've read the reports on Draenith psychology, right? They're social creatures. Isolation isn't kindness, it's a death sentence, just slower. Veles's expression softened slightly. I have worked here for 12 years, Cadet. I have seen many species arrive, and I have seen several pass into extinction. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is allow them to end on their own terms. Virix chose this path. Did he, or did you make him feel like he had no other choice? Owen took a breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Let me ask you something, Director. In the past week, has Virix displayed any aggressive behavior toward me? No, but... Has he threatened anyone, made any hostile moves, shown any signs of the volatility mentioned in his file? No. Then maybe, Owen said carefully, the problem isn't Virix. Maybe the problem is that everyone expects him to be dangerous, so they treat him like a bomb waiting to explode. And when you treat someone like a monster long enough, they start believing it. Veles was quiet for a long moment. What would you have me do, Cadet Blake? Override the Council's decision based on 1 week of peaceful behavior? I'd have you consider that maybe Virix doesn't need isolation. He needs people who see him as a person instead of a problem. Owen gestured back toward where Virix waited near the barrier. For 15 years, everyone has kept their distance. I sat down and shared a sandwich. That's all it took. 1 sandwich and someone willing to listen. The universe is not so simple. Sometimes it is. Owen pulled out his datapad and loaded the recordings he had made. I've been documenting our interactions, every conversation, every shared meal. I want to submit these as evidence for a behavioral review. Veles looked at the datapad, then at Owen, then back at the datapad. A behavioral review would require council approval. It would take months. Vrix's transfer is in 20 days. Then we have 20 days to make a case. Owen held out the datapad. Please, just look at the recordings. Watch how he responds. He's not dangerous. He's just been hurt and alone for so long that he forgot how to be anything else. The director took the datapad slowly. He scrolled through the recordings, his expression unreadable. Minutes passed. Finally, he spoke. There is someone on station right now who might be able to help. Inspector Taller Quinn from the Galactic Council. She is here for routine evaluations, but her specialty is sentient rights. Can you arrange a meeting? I can try. Veles handed back the datapad. But understand something, Cadet. Even if we get a review, even if we prove Vrix is no longer a threat, the Council may still approve his transfer. He requested it himself. They may decide we need to honor his wishes. Then I'll change his wishes, Owen said. I'll show him that he has something worth staying for. Veles studied him for a long moment. You care deeply about this creature. I care about someone who's been alone too long, that's all. That is not all, I think. Veles turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Cadet Blake, I hope you are right. I hope one sandwich and a willing listener are enough, because if they are not, we will all have to live with the consequences. Owen watched the director walk away, then returned to the barrier. Vrix was exactly where he had left him, massive head lowered, scales dim. How much did you hear? Owen asked. All of it. My hearing is exceptional. Vrix's voice came out flat. You should not fight this, Owen. I chose isolation for a reason. What reason? Because I am tired. Because I have carried grief for 15 years and it grows heavier each day. Because if I go somewhere with no one to disappoint, no one to frighten, no one to hurt, then at least I will do no more damage. Owen sat down on the wall and pulled out his lunch. Here's what I think. I think you're scared, not of hurting people. You're scared that if you let yourself hope things could be different, that hope will break you worse than the grief already has. He unwrapped a sandwich. I think you chose isolation because it feels safer than risking connection and losing it again. Vrix said nothing. But here's the thing about hope, Owen continued. It's not something you find when everything is perfect. It's what you choose when everything is broken. You choose to believe that broken things can heal, that lonely people can find each other, that songs can be sung again even after 15 years of silence. What if I choose to hope and nothing changes? Owen smiled. Then at least you won't die wondering what might have happened if you had tried. The hearing took place in the station's main conference room on the 6th day. Owen had never seen so many important people gathered in one place. Director Veles sat at the head of the table. Instructor Wells sat to his right. Inspector Taller Quinn, a Valorian with silver skin that reflected light like mirrors, occupied the center position. Owen stood at the opposite end, hands clasped behind his back, trying not to shake. Cadet Blake has submitted evidence that challenges the current classification of Vrix the Draenith, Inspector Quinn said. Her voice reminded Owen of wind chimes, musical and clear. We are here to review this evidence and determine if modification of containment protocols is warranted. The recordings played on the large screen. Owen sharing sandwiches, Vrix speaking about his lost world. The lullaby, reduced to audio only but still hauntingly beautiful. Their conversations about grief and hope and the courage it took to keep living. Several station staff members testified. Most repeated variations of the same theme. Vrix was dangerous, volatile, best kept isolated. One researcher mentioned the incident with Cross, her voice tight with remembered fear. Then Rowe testified. Owen's Centauri roommate stood before the panel and said, I have watched Owen make this journey every day. I have seen him return with joy in his face. He does not look like someone visiting a dangerous creature. He looks like someone visiting a friend. Instructor Wells spoke next. In my 20 years of teaching, I have learned that compassion is not weakness. Owen saw what we all missed. He saw a person in pain instead of a problem to be contained. Perhaps we should question why it took a 19-year-old cadet to recognize what trained professionals could not. Finally, they brought Virix into the room. The dragon barely fit through the reinforced doors. Station security flanked him on both sides, weapons ready but not aimed. Virix's scales were dim gray, almost colorless under the harsh lights. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone afraid of taking up too much space. Owen wanted to run to him, but forced himself to stay still. Inspector Quinn addressed Virix directly. "You requested transfer to an uninhabited moon. Why?" Virix's multiple eyes surveyed the room before settling on Owen. "Because I believed I deserved isolation. Because I hurt someone and I thought punishment was appropriate. Because living among others reminded me constantly of everything I had lost." "And now," Quinn asked, "what do you believe now?" The silence stretched. Owen could hear his own heartbeat. "Now," Virix said slowly, "I believe I was wrong about many things. I was not punishing myself for hurting that researcher. I was punishing myself for surviving when my family did not. I wore isolation like armor, believing it would protect me from further loss. Instead, it nearly destroyed me." "The cadet changed your perspective." Quinn's reflective skin caught the light as she leaned forward. "The cadet shared his lunch," Virix replied. "Such a simple thing. A human child barely out of adolescence with ordinary grades and uncertain future sat down beside my prison and treated me like someone worth knowing. He did not flinch from my appearance. He did not pity my grief. He simply offered companionship and asked for nothing in return." Veles spoke up. "But the risk remains. Your species is powerful. You could harm people without meaning to." "I could," Virix agreed. "Just as anyone with strength could harm those weaker, but strength is not the same as danger. I have learned the difference in these past 6 days." "True. Danger comes from isolation, from believing you are so broken that you must separate yourself from all connection. That is how monsters are made. Not from claws and teeth, but from loneliness that turns inward until it consumes everything." Inspector Quinn made a note on her datapad. "If your classification were changed, if the barriers were reduced, what would you do?" "I would like to remain here," Virix said. His scales flickered with faint color for the first time since entering the room. "I would like to learn to live again, to speak with others, to perhaps teach the younger species about my people so the Draenith are not entirely forgotten. I would like to sing again, even if only for an audience of one cadet with terrible taste in sandwiches." Owen bit back a laugh. Several panel members smiled. "And if we cannot approve this change?" Quinn asked. "If the council determines that isolation remains the safest option?" Virix's scales went dark again. "Then I will go to the uninhabited moon as planned, but I will go knowing that I was wrong to choose it. That isolation is not safety. That fear of connection causes more harm than connection itself ever could." Quinn looked at her notes, then at Owen, then back at Virix. "I would like to speak with Cadet Blake alone, please. Everyone else may leave." The room emptied slowly. Owen watched Virix depart, those multiple eyes holding his gaze until the doors closed. "Sit down, Cadet," Quinn said. Owen sat. "You understand what you have done here?" The inspector's mirrored skin made it hard to read her expression. "You have challenged decades of protocol. You have risked your safety and your academic standing. You have inserted yourself into a situation that was, by all official accounts, resolved. Why?" "Because it wasn't resolved," Owen said. "It was just hidden. There's a difference. Many would say you overstepped boundaries." "Maybe, but boundaries are just lines we draw to feel safe. Sometimes the only way to help someone is to cross those lines and accept the risk." Quinn studied him for a long moment, then she smiled. "The galaxy needs more humans like you, Owen Blake, people who see problems and think. That is mine to solve, even when logic says otherwise." She stood. "I will recommend classification change to Code Yellow monitored integration. The barriers will be reduced. Standard preserved protocols will apply. Virix will remain here under observation, with opportunity for social integration." Owen felt his chest tighten with relief. "Thank you." Do not thank me, Quinn said. Thank yourself. You saw someone drowning and threw them a rope. That is what civilization should be, what it often is not. She walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Cadet. Your field trip ends tomorrow. What will you do then? Owen stood, whatever it takes to come back. 3 months later, Owen stood on the observation deck watching Vrix fly. The dragon had waited weeks before attempting it. The barriers had come down gradually, replaced by standard preserve boundaries that any resident could cross with monitoring. Vrix had moved cautiously at first, testing each new freedom like someone expecting it to vanish. Now he soared above the purple landscape, wings spread wide enough to cast shadows across entire sections of the preserve. His scales blazed with colors Owen had never seen before, deep purples that shifted to gold, blues that reminded him of Earth's oceans, greens like forest canopies. The patterns moved across his body in waves, each one a different story told in light and color. Beautiful, is he not? Ro appeared beside Owen, carrying 2 cups of something that smelled like cinnamon. I never imagined creatures could be art. Owen accepted the cup. How are the new protocols working out? Better than expected. 3 other species have requested behavioral reviews after seeing Vrix's results. The crystalline researchers arrived last week to work on his memory preservation project. Ro's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. You started something here, friend, something that extends beyond one dragon. The decision to stay had been easier than Owen expected. When he requested academic deferment to work as a research intern, Instructor Wells had supported it immediately. The Academy approved a 6-month field study program, crediting it toward his xenobiology requirements. His foster sister had called him an idiot and told him she was proud in the same breath. Director Veles had offered him a small quarters near the research wing and a stipend that barely covered basics. Owen had accepted without hesitation. Now he spent his days documenting interspecies communication protocols, helping develop new integration frameworks, and eating lunch with a dragon who had learned to laugh again. Owen, Vrix's voice came through the comm system. Join me. Owen touched the badge on his chest. I cannot fly, remember? Humans are embarrassingly terrestrial. The shuttle, take the shuttle. 10 minutes later, Owen piloted a small observation shuttle into the preserve's airspace. Vrix glided alongside, easily matching the shuttle's speed. Through the window, Owen could see every detail of those magnificent scales, each pattern more complex than the last. I have something to show you, Vrix said. He altered course, heading toward the eastern mountains. They flew in comfortable silence until Vrix descended toward a crystalline outcropping that jutted from the mountainside. The shuttle touched down nearby. Owen climbed out, using the moon's lower gravity to bound across the rocky terrain. What is this place? Listen, Vrix said. Owen stood still. At first he heard nothing but wind. Then gradually he detected it, a low humming sound that seemed to come from the crystals themselves. As the wind shifted direction, the pitch changed, creating harmonies that rose and fell like music. Singing stones, Owen breathed, like your homeworld. Similar, Vrix agreed. His scales pulsed in time with the crystal song. I discovered them weeks ago but waited to share. Some gifts require the right moment. Owen walked closer to the crystals, running his hand along their surface. They were warm to the touch and vibrated gently beneath his fingers. They're incredible. The crystalline researchers believe they can program these formations with memory data. They can store songs, voices, images. Everything about my people that still exists in my mind can be preserved here. Vrix lowered his head until he was level with Owen. Because of you, the Draenith will not fade into forgotten darkness. We will sing forever in these stones. Because of both of us, Owen corrected. I just showed up with sandwiches. You did the hard part. You chose to hope again. Vrix's multiple eyes gleamed. In my culture, there was a ceremony. When someone saved another's life, when bonds were formed that transcended family, we would exchange songs. I would like to exchange songs with you, Owen Blake. I cannot sing like you do. Then sing like a human sings, from your heart in your limited tonal range with your terrible rhythm. Vrix's scales rippled with amusement. Sing something that matters to you. Owen thought for a moment, then began humming a lullaby his mother used to sing. The words were simple, the melody basic compared to Draenith harmonics, but it was honest and it carried love across time and loss. When he finished, Vrix began his own song. Not the lullaby he had shared before, but something new. Something that sounded like dawn breaking after endless night, like hope discovered in unexpected places, like two voices harmonizing across the vast space between species. The crystal formations caught the song and amplified it, sending it echoing across the entire preserve. Owen imagined station personnel pausing to listen, imagined other creatures stopping to hear this new sound. When silence returned, Owen found himself crying, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming rightness of this moment. "What does it mean?" he asked. "Your song." "It is called The Shared Meal," Vrix replied. "It tells the story of a young one who crossed barriers to offer kindness to a stranger, who saw person instead of monster, who reminded an old survivor that songs exist even in silence, that connection heals what isolation only wounds, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is share your lunch with someone who has forgotten how to hope." Owen laughed through his tears. "You made an entire song about me being awkwardly nice." "I made an entire song about how one human with ordinary grades and uncertain future taught a dying species how to live again." Vrix's scales blazed with every color imaginable. "That seems worth commemorating." They sat together as the sun set behind Thalassa 7, casting purple and gold light across the landscape. The crystal formations sang their stored memories to the wind. Somewhere in the preserve, other creatures called to each other in languages Owen was learning to understand. "I received a message today," Owen said. "From the Academy. They want me to write a paper on interspecies integration protocols. It could become standard curriculum." "Will you write it?" "Yes, but I am going to argue that protocols are not what matters most. That procedures and safety measures have their place, but real integration happens when someone decides to sit down and share a meal, when someone chooses connection over fear." Vrix hummed softly, "Simple wisdom from a simple human." "Simple does not mean wrong." "No," Vrix agreed, "it does not." The stars emerged overhead, thousands of them scattered across the darkness. Owen wondered how many worlds they represented. How many species struggled with the same barriers, the same fears, the same isolation that had nearly destroyed Vrix. "We should go back," Owen said eventually. "Dinner will start soon." "Yes, and I have invited several others to join us. The crystalline researchers, Rowe, Instructor Wells. Director Veli's expressed interest as well." Owen smiled. "Look at you hosting dinner parties." "I learned from the best." Vrix stood, stretching his wings. "Someone once taught me that eating alone is terrible. I intend to never do it again." They returned to the station together, dragon and human, flying side by side through the purple twilight. Behind them, the singing stones continued their eternal chorus, preserving memories and hope for any who chose to listen. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other barriers waited to be crossed by someone brave enough to offer a sandwich and say hello.